Fallout 76 was released in November of 2018 and has been met with overwhelming negativity from most players and reviewers. It is for this reason that I feel compelled to open this video with a disclaimer. This will not be yet another hate video adding onto that pile, but that does not mean that the game doesn't deserve the hate. I would go as far as saying that Bethesda was unethical to release the game in its current state, and over 2 months since its launch, it isn't much better. Calling this game broken would be a disservice because saying that something is broken implies that it was once functional. Fallout 76 has never been in that state. There is no doubt in my mind that every single developer who worked on this game has cringed a few of their organs into dust since they got word that Bethesda was launching the game over a year before it was ready to see the light of the public eye. Above all else, this game is not finished. There will be a second video released on this channel going through the glitches and problems I encountered while playing Fallout 76. I have spent almost 100 hours with the game. I have done nearly every quest that didn't break and even managed to complete some that did. At no point in that time did I ever go for more than a few minutes without encountering a glitch. Whether that was a minor visual problem, everything in my camp duplicating on its own, or one of the 50 times that either the game or the servers crashed on me. The glitches are so inescapable that they become part of the game. They embody it. More than ever before, with all of the horrible implications that the statement brings, it is true that they aren't really bugs, they're features. Fallout 76 makes Fallout 4 look like a Nintendo game in terms of polish. Bethesda, as far as I'm concerned, you committed a crime by releasing this game when it wasn't finished. I was so certain that this was a quick cash-in, that you were trading integrity for money between your releases that have way more heart and work poured into them. I thought I would only have to play this game for 20 hours and then I could dismiss it as exactly that. I was wrong, and that's why I played it for so much longer. There are too many signs of love and care for me to ignore in this game from developers who clearly gave a shit about what they were doing. You have alienated a massive portion of your audience, exchanged a huge amount of respect for your company for money, and cheated your developers out of finishing a project that at least some of them cared about. It is unbelievable to me that a game from a company as large as yours has released in this state for full price. Here's my unsolicited advice. Refund half the cost of this game to everyone who paid full price for it. Fix the foundation of the game and bundle that in with the paid expansion that adds more content to make that money back, and actually finish it this time. Add an offline mode with a set of characters that can never go into the online version so people can avoid the embarrassing state of your servers and have the freedom to mod it however they like. You'll take a financial hit doing this, of course, but I think it would fully reverse the damage done to your reputation. In fact, after what we've seen happen to Hello Games since updating No Man's Sky, you may earn more respect by doing this. I'd guess Fallout 76 was still profitable, even though many more people than I expected made the correct decision to avoid purchasing it until the reviews came in. That could be because of how confusing it was to understand what the game even was while it was being marketed, but that'll be something we get into momentarily. Despite everything I just said and am about to say, Fallout 76 is worth playing if you love Fallout 4's main gameplay loop, especially if you love the exploration side of Bethesda's open worlds. Just don't pay full price for it. In fact, if by some miracle Bethesda does decide to fix and expand upon the game, I'd suggest waiting for that DLC to be released and then jump in. I think you could have a good time, eventually. Even with the new rumors that the game is going free to play, I would suggest holding off until it receives some updates if they're even true. And just so we're clear, going free to play doesn't absolve Bethesda of what they did to their most engaged customers who paid money for this game at launch. Conversely, I think it would be a huge slap in the face for them. Although with the price of some of the cosmetic microtransactions being more than what the base game is worth, I have to wonder how that DLC could ever properly come into existence. I think you're getting it by now, this whole thing is a mess. And Bethesda, this careful consideration for money far above absolutely everything else is now the first thing that comes to mind when I think of your company. And I'm certain I'm not alone. I think that's enough though, let's get started for real now and talk about the game.
Cool, I'm now immune to the Scorched Plague, which I didn't think was gonna happen, but it's
Wait,
good.
is oh. Okay, your power armor is invisible, and yeah, all right, that was.
Did it,
There are just so many moments I wish you could see, and you must have them too. Like it's just like
yeah. Did I become the Slender Man for a second?
you were climbing into an invisible set of power armor, just amazing. Sorry, was that it? That we just solved the mystery. We just got inoculated to the
Yep.
plague that ended humanity. That's all it took. We can draw many more parallels between Fallout 76 and No Man's Sky. The one that I have to address now was caused by the same unwillingness to be direct about the game before its release, and the same willingness to outright lie about what the developers were direct about. Bethesda claimed Fallout 76 would be a fresh, bold direction for the Fallout series while also being true to its traditions and still feel like a proper Fallout experience. Multiplayer was core to that experience, so much so that you would always be online while playing, but you could of course choose to play by yourself and still have a yabba dabba do time. That always online system will be so seamless that you would never see a server while playing. It's the biggest Fallout yet. It's so different, but it's also the same. It is so shockingly easy to describe what Fallout 76 is that it's a good place to lay a foundation for a different, far more difficult question. How exactly did this game happen? Fallout 76 is Fallout 4 without NPC conversations, the option to now play with others who inhabit the same server that you're on, like fellow explorers wandering around, and a slightly different leveling system. It also changed how VATS works and has some light survival elements. And that's it. That's what Fallout 76 is. That was the big mystery that Bethesda had so much trouble explaining. You could also propose that it's an MMORPG, an oxymoronic, miniature, massively multiplayer online role-playing game. It has a world with distinct zones, quest hubs, and parts of it are gated by level restrictions enforced by high-level enemies. Said enemies will respawn in areas while you're still in them, and you can even sit around farming them for experience, resources, and loot. There are even daily quests, so you'll want to log back in. Fallout 76 has everything else that Fallout 4 does. It has a story, it has a post-apocalyptic open world to explore with many locations to visit, it has the same real-time combat system, only now you can't pause it since you're always online, it has quests, goals, settlements, workshops, crafting, and yes, it has NPCs. Congratulations! The reaction to Fallout 76's NPCs has been so strong and bizarre that I wonder if the meaning of the term is currently in flux. If enough people agree to a new meaning of a word or term, then that becomes an acceptable norm. An NPC does not have to be a human character, nor do they have to be directly interactable. Enemies in games are NPCs, background characters are NPCs, it's quite a broad term, and yet because there are no human NPCs in Fallout 76 that you can have conversations with, most people have agreed that the game has no NPCs, period. There are traders and quest givers in 76. The vast majority of them are robots or AI on computer terminals, but you can also follow the stories of characters that left behind holotapes and other narrative signs in the environment. Much of the game is spent following the trail of Vault 76's Overseer, who is very much alive and adds some alternative perspectives to areas where you find her holotapes. And there was at least one friendly super mutant that I encountered who I could trade with. I want to make it clear that I am not saying any of this is good or bad, it's just a list of things that are in the game that prove 76 does have NPCs. What it doesn't have are populated towns and conversations. There were post-apocalyptic settlements in Appalachia, but now they're all barren due to story reasons that we'll get to later. Whether this was a good decision or not is difficult to judge. I know that many people may strongly disagree with that since they expect conversations and more traditional quest givers in their Fallout games, but, well, I've already spoken for too long in the past about how poorly I regard Fallout 4's story. If you've watched my prior videos on Fallout 4, you may remember me saying that I wish Bethesda hadn't bothered, that instead they had focused on either storylines without the illusion of choice so they could be more direct and better developed, or that there were no conversations at all, and instead the game was about exploration, combat, and then gathering. On paper, Fallout 76 is exactly this, and eerily it appears like I got my wish granted. The fact that it's considered a colossal failure may lead to the conclusion that I was sorely mistaken on what Bethesda should be doing with this series. Except that the time and resources diverted from traditionally told stories, conversations, and interactable human NPC settlements were meant to be funneled into the rest of the game. to improve all 3 of those phases that I consider to be the engine that powers Bethesda games. You wander until you find a location, kill some enemies there, and then pillage before beginning it again. Not only did this not happen, each of these phases has already been done far better in previous Bethesda titles. If you'll pardon the repetition, I want to reiterate that because it's vitally important. Not only did Fallout 76 not receive extra attention in its core systems despite being a streamlined version of Fallout 4, Bethesda has already been more successful in earlier games in these 3 areas that also had interactable NPCs, a bigger story, and settlements, etc. The big question comes back again: how exactly did this game happen?
Interesting bone structure.
We have to address the elephants in the video now, the fact that I enjoyed my time with the game more than I hated it, and that the prevalence of glitches makes it near impossible to properly judge how 76 works. And these elephants are tightly intertwined like some horrible circus performance gone awry. The glitches in 76 were so entertaining that they became the game for me, both as a player and a game critic. I started eagerly anticipating what weird shit would appear at the next location on the horizon. Sometimes they would have a payoff instantly, other times they would tease for a bit before showing the goods. Without a word of exaggeration, this became the game. When Fallout 76 crashed, I was happy. I would get to put another tally on the scrap of paper I kept on my desk. 20 crashes, 30 crashes, 45 crashes. I began to revel in the dysfunction. 3 of my sessions with the game were spent with Mandalore. He's another YouTuber you probably haven't heard of because his audience is much smaller than mine and his videos are terrible. But you know me, I'm a nice guy and I'd like to give a tiny, obscure YouTuber a shout out, so I played with him for a while. I have so many quests on my screen right now that like it's cut off
mine's
at the
going
bottom.
over the menu.
Yeah, it's...
I like how the text also like bleeds off the screen on the bottom.
Yeah, that too, yeah.
It's like a joke.
It's...
It's like an actual joke.
This bug-ridden experience was infectious. Corpses moving on their own.
Compared to all the other bodies I've found. Is this ragdolling for you too?
Yeah, losing all your clothes whenever you go through a load screen. That happening plus wearing power armor making you look like a naked Slenderman. Voice chat remaining active even after the game crashed for both of us and was no longer running. Being attacked by an invisible bear. Strange shadows being cast on smoke on a mountain like a murky portal into a shadow realm where that bear probably came from. This became the game. This became thoroughly entertaining for all the wrong reasons, but entertaining nonetheless.
Scientists log, day 3. You found the anomaly and there's no signs of anything changing. I don't know what's going on in this Mordor mountain, but there's something wrong with the shadows. It's like they're forming some kind of building on their own. Almost like a mind of their own. Wait, what's that sound? No, it's the scorched! Ah!
That was amazing. These bugs make it so difficult to gauge how the game was meant to work. We can of course condemn its current state quite easily, but it's more interesting to try to figure out how 76 would be if it was finished and worked properly. It's also more damning because even if that was the case, I suspect that it still wouldn't be all that successful. Here's what I mean. Despite having virtually no changes, combat in this game is far worse than in Fallout 4 because enemies will teleport all around you. This can sometimes present itself as the classic type of lag you could see in any online game, but it happens more than it doesn't. It's almost certainly caused by having too many players on the same server as you who are also doing too many things for those servers to keep up with over the entire map. An event that causes almost everyone on the server to gather in one place will make the rest of the server very laggy while also being tolerable at the location where everyone else is. Strangely, the inverse seemed to also often be true in my experience, and it was the starter areas around Vault 76 that lagged the hardest whenever I visited them since that's where most people were exploring. If I stayed away from them, then the game would be more stable. Never stable outright, but better. The best glitch that happened was when Mandalore and I got a server to ourselves. For whatever reason, other players were not replaced as the night went on. As the map became emptier and emptier, the game ran better and better. In every way. Performance, combat, looting. It was only in those 2 brief hours, like being in the eye of a storm as it passes through, that Fallout 76 felt like it lived up to its most basic promise. Fallout 4 with a friend, and after that it was gone forever. Not that Mandalore is a friend or anything, fuck him. Enemies will hit you and you won't take damage. You will hit them and that won't register either. You will shoot a ghoul in the head and it'll take a second for that impact to trigger. Or their head will pop off when you kill them but also not be removed, so there will be two heads of the same enemy when you inspect the corpse. This happened more than once. I think you get it, and the other video will go through these glitches in far more detail, probably way more detail than is necessary. The bugs made everything so entertaining that 76 became its own The Room type experience, and possibly the only time gameplay has ever managed to be so bad it's good. But that's not the discussion we should be having. Everything in Fallout 76 is steeped in this awkwardness, this clash of priorities and nothing working together. It's like a mutant that shouldn't exist and is a blight on nature, and awkward really is the best word for it. Playing the game feels like an elongated version of watching a movie when your parents walk in exactly as a sex scene starts. You don't want to acknowledge it by changing the channel, and they don't want to acknowledge it by leaving, so you just sit still and hope it'll be over as soon as it possibly can, although maybe 76 is even worse than that. It would be like if your parents did respond by saying to each other, "Hey, we should do that later." The game wants you to play with your friends or group with people you find in the wild, but it also wants you to spend hours reading computer journal entries and listening to holotapes while also on voice chat, which, by the way, did not have a push-to-talk option until it was patched in over a month after release. The game has survival elements by forcing you to eat and drink regularly, but you can't actually die of starvation or dehydration. You lose health, but that stops at 5% of your HP. It's also so easy to drink and eat that I think it's easier to get food in this post-apocalyptic game than it is in pre-apocalyptic real life. Just go in any direction and start looting and then you can eat. Even irradiated food is no problem because all roads lead to Radaway when it comes to exposure, food, and drink. Radaway is everywhere. You will find so much of it that you will be throwing it away after a while, so you don't have to worry. It's a non-issue and a waste of a system. Speaking of throwing things away, the game wants you to loot everything on enemies and in the environment, but your inventory limitation is too low to do so. You can move your camp and its storage freely around the map with you, but this storage is also shockingly low and can never be increased. Adding more boxes to your camp is merely decorative and accesses the same inventory. Looting junk is essential for crafting weapons and mods, and unlocking those mods has to be done via breaking down weapons you find on enemies that are often too heavy to carry. I was constantly hitting the limit on both my personal inventory and the camps, while also being chronically low on crafting ingredients and missing many weapon mods near the end of the game, since more and more of my inventory was reserved for multiple weapons. This system makes no sense. At one point things got so bad that I was throwing away bobby pins and stim packs just to make space. And I strongly considered ignoring the system completely and just living with the slower movement speed penalty. I still don't know if that would have been faster or not than the hours I spent organizing my stash space. Exploration is the one that hurts the most because this is where the game is partly successful but should have still done far better. This is the core of the Bethesda-style open world, and everything I just described about looting and the camp should have contributed to 76 being the best iteration of it. If the camp stash had been unlimited, it would have made perfect sense to constantly be setting up your camp in a new central location when you arrive in a new zone, and then make excursions to each place and then return to camp to offload and craft between each one. Not only is this not the case, there's also little reason to visit these places. The best 76 can offer are either narrative reasons or the promise of seeing something visually interesting. Both of these were few and far between, but were still successful when they did happen. Each location in these games is a question. You either hear about it elsewhere in the world, see the grayed out icon on your map, notice something nearby on your compass, or you visually see something that catches your attention on the horizon as you're exploring. Each one of these should be a promise to provide you with either an interesting quest, some combat, visuals, or loot. They should make you ask, what's over there, and then give you something for checking it out. I argued that in Fallout 4, character progression had been simplified during leveling up in exchange for those pieces of power being broken away and placed around the world, in bobbleheads and skill magazines. This made exploring even mundane locations rewarding and at least a little exciting, since no matter what, you would be developing your character at each place. Fallout 76 was poised to fully embrace this system since it allows you to wander its world in a much freer way. There are no NPCs that you have to constantly return to, nor are there many NPC quest givers to constantly revisit throughout long quest chains. 76 does have this a little bit with robots like Rose the Raider, but it's far less than in Fallout 4, Fallout 3, and Skyrim, and in many cases quest stages will update automatically while you're out. The ideal here is that each location in a Bethesda game would have both something interesting to do and or see, plus a compelling character development reward. It would keep you in that Bethesda-style immersive cycle of getting lost to exploration, not needing to have a long quest chain to send you to each location, and that you can go anywhere in any order that you please. That last one is the only thing that 76 gets right. Skill magazines and bobbleheads are in Fallout 76, but they have been downgraded to temporary buffs that are so minor that they're effectively useless. Fallout 76 falls so short of its Bethesda game potential that it managed to make finding a bobblehead a boring event. In Fallout 3 and 4, they were always great finds, permanent boosts to your character. Fallout 76, the game that is meant to be all about that side of the game, does it worse. I'm sorry for what I'm about to say because I think it will come across as disrespectful, but I no longer think that anyone making the big decisions at Bethesda actually plays their games, or maybe any games at all. This is such an obvious thing to see. The fun of collecting bobbleheads has even been brought up in a talk by one of their developers. And yet the game that has the most freeform exploration and shoves you into wandering through the world looking for stuff is the one that does the worst job at character progression via that exploration and looking for stuff. When you level up, you get to allocate a special point and choose a perk card. These cards are given to you randomly, and every few levels you get to open a pack of cards for a few bonus perks to add to your collection. Cards have values assigned to them, and you need the appropriate amount of special stats in order to use those cards. So if you want to equip a 3 perk card and a 2 perk card in the strength stat, you will need 5 strength for all of those points. It's a little confusing at first when you're playing, but becomes straightforward after you gain a few levels. If you ignore all the ironic enjoyment I got out of bugs and glitches, Fallout 76 is a 2 out of 10 for me. If you fixed all of those major glitches, I think it would go up to a 4 out of 10. If you then changed bobbleheads and skill magazines to be permanent boosts that were more liberally spread throughout Appalachia, and then also placed perk packs and special perk cards in many locations as well, it would go up another 2 points to a 6 out of 10. I'm confident that this is such a tiny change that Bethesda's team could make it happen with a few hours of dev time. Assign different values to the bobbleheads and magazines that already exist, put collectible perk packs in locations. If you want to go further and have special perk cards be rewards for some quests instead of literal piles of garbage to disassemble, then that would be even better. You could make the main appeal of Fallout 76 twice as good in a few hours. Let's look at Fallout 3 and New Vegas for what else they could have drawn. Fallout 3 has quests that end in a reward for permanent stat increases. So instead of just finding it at the rect location, you would have to perform a task. Fallout 76 almost does this with locations like Camp McClintock and going through army training, but the reward is a narrative one instead of tied to gameplay. New Vegas also had hidden perks for performing certain actions or repeating the same task often enough. One of the first ones you can get is by killing enough mutated insects that you gain a permanent damage boost against them. This is another concept that could have been tied to locations in Fallout 76. There are some quests that come close to this, mostly world events that function as open quests that anyone nearby can automatically join if they get close and can contribute toward completing without having to manually group with everyone else. But these rewards are temporary, like the Wise Mothman giving you an experience gain buff at the end of the Lighthouse quest. The two ways the game does try to give you progression end up being lackluster: legendary enemies and the dilution of perk cards. Legendary enemies drop legendary items, and these are almost always garbage. These special enemies are simply too rare to have such a high variance of worthless possible outcomes. They should be far more limited to specific weapon and armor types for a start, instead of being capable of spawning as useless knives and armor literally made of wood. Making this worse is that you can't disassemble legendary items, which could have been a good way to fix this problem. Break down legendary loot for a legendary crafting material to upgrade actual good legendary drops so that they're always useful in some way when you find one, Instead, I would sometimes discover piles of discarded legendary loot from other players on the ground where it belonged. The issue with perk cards is slightly more complicated. Why are there so many types of perk cards that give you flat bonuses of the same thing? You can already rank up versions by combining two of the same cards, so why are there 3 different sets of plus damage when you could have more interesting bonuses instead? Why have plus damage cards at all when they could have been bundled together onto perk cards with a specific bonus in addition to damage to make them worth equipping? This would also solve the other bizarre issue of perk cards being swappable whenever you like. So if you want to use the perk that makes fast travel cost fewer caps, you can micromanage your cards to use it right before the jump and then take it off again afterward. Same for hacking and lockpicking and crafting cards. There's no penalty or cooldown for switching cards, and many of them are so situational that you won't want to keep them on. I still did because I was too lazy to micromanage these cards a few times every hour, but it's still a flaw of the system. Situational cards could have not taken up any special points so that you could have had more rewards to find and use for leveling. This feels like the first iteration of a leveling system that received no testing and no refinement before the game was rushed to release. There's so little of this constant progression in 76 that picking up plans and recipes was the most exciting thing in most locations, outside of whatever funny glitch that I could find. I did very little cooking and crafting, yet finding these plans was still all I would enjoy picking up because at least it was something. The other problem is that it's possible some locations do have more substantial resource caches to find, but that other players may have gotten to them already and they didn't respawn before you got there. Loot on enemies and containers is private so that multiple players can loot things without worrying they're depriving their teammates, but anything that's out in the world, such as this locked fridge with a bunch of items inside, can be looted and appear empty if you don't know better. So you may put yourself through the struggle of going to a difficult out-of-reach location and find nothing there, only to be left wondering if you just got there at a bad time. This problem of a lack of progression also makes some of the more interesting locations feel empty. The farther away from Vault 76 you get, the more unusual the environment becomes. The world zones are split with forests, mountains, polluted valleys, swamps, and the trenched plains in the east. While none of this particularly stands out, they are new locations for the series and grabbed my attention at least a little, like these towered apartments, this excavator, and this town ran by an AI mayor, until I learned that there's nothing interesting there to find. The visuals and concept didn't make up for it. There was one exception. The parts of the map that had been infested with strangler vines were by far the most interesting thing in the game, and they could very well be the most interesting location in any Bethesda Fallout game. The glowing sea in Fallout 4 would be the only contender against it. This spreading growth was way more captivating than the scorched beasts that were used as the main threat in Fallout 76, and created the most engaging locations in terms of visuals. I'm showing some of them now and I think they speak for themselves. It was the only place in the game that made me stop and really pay attention. It even had a climax with this massive suspended mass in the forest, like a nuke's mushroom cloud made of plants and rocks. This location and the surrounding devastation wrought by the strangler vines is one of the main reasons why I think Fallout 76 isn't a soulless cash grab, even though the locations definitely do feel barren with so little to do in them. It may surprise you to hear that 76 has just as much content as Fallout 4, if not more. This is a big game, and that's why I can still give it my tepid recommendation if you love that part of Bethesda games. Just again, like I said earlier, wait for some updates and a price reduction. I can't shake this feeling that I'm appraising something that wasn't ready to be judged. Another example being the vaults in the game. There are other vaults besides 76. Some of them have even been opened and you can find corpses wearing the jumpsuits from them. But you can't enter any of them yourself. Like the Bubbleheads, finding other vaults and learning about their experiments are often a highlight of Fallout games. In 76, they're all closed and stay closed. After I first found one, I was so excited and spent a while wondering how I'd find the right access code to open the vault. And then I found another one and googled the truth and was sorely disappointed. One of the vaults even seems to be linked to those strangler vines from some experiment that spread out of control from within the vault after the apocalypse. Whether it's a planned expansion or unfinished content is impossible to determine without word from Bethesda, who I wouldn't trust after this anyway. It's a shame. The best way 76 embraces the Bethesda-style world also shows how much potential was squandered with this concept. Anyone who has played one of their open world games has likely been overwhelmed by how many quests they end up accumulating. I think this is a deliberate decision and acts as a net in two ways. The first being that the player finds themselves caught with so many things to do and see, and it pushes you into exploring new places in the world. 76 forgoes the traditional way of using this net and instead bakes it right into exploration. You are simply given quests when you arrive at most areas, which also have breadcrumbs leading to new areas with their own quests and breadcrumbs. No matter what direction you decide to take when you leave Vault 76, you will always hit content that you can do that inevitably chains you through the whole map and all of its features. If this system had been expertly tied with actual worthwhile things to do, find, and see in each of these locations, and its combat system had been updated with some new abilities and mechanics instead of being heavily downgraded by server lag, then I think Fallout 76 would have been something truly special. The story could have saved half of it. I know that because there were brief flashes of brilliance here and there throughout the map. It's the final thing we'll speak about, and it's also the final time I can link it to that all-important question. How exactly did this game happen? The most interesting thing Fallout 76 does with its story is also what appears to be its most maligned feature: no conversations with human NPCs. If you allow yourself to tolerate this change, and I argue the fact that this isn't called Fallout 5 is a great reason to accept something new from this series, then what you get out of 76 is the first Fallout game that actually feels like it takes place after the end of the world. I know how that sounds, they're all post-apocalyptic games, right? It's right there in the title, but all of the other Fallout games have large communities of people thriving in the irradiated wastes. Whether that's the mostly functional societies in the first two games, New Vegas and Fallout 4, or the groups that feel like they're LARPing in Fallout 3. The world has ended in these games, but it's recovered enough to be considered something else by the time you explore it. It's another phase, not the end. Not so in Appalachia, which is ironic considering the region wasn't hit by any nuclear bombs. What has happened instead is that the world has ended here twice. The first time when nuclear fallout contaminated the region and destroyed the rest of civilization, and then a second time when a radiation-borne scourge sweeps through all the survivors years later. I want to focus on how different this makes Fallout 76 from the other games. It is by far the most lonely experience of them all. That feeling you may have gotten now and then in the other games, as you rummage carefully through a ruined house and subconsciously soak in some hints of what kind of people lived there before the apocalypse, that never really goes away. Even some of the robots ended up feeling like extensions of the ghosts that linger in each location. This was moderately compelling despite all the problems with the game. It suffers from some of the typical shortcomings that plague Bethesda's narratives, but I am surprised to find myself considering 76's world a greater success than Fallout 4's. It taps into something much closer to the last person left on Earth scenario rather than the fantasy post-apocalyptic. Unexpectedly, other players did little to ruin that experience for me since it never felt like they were canon, despite the game's best efforts to contextualize the multiplayer system. I viewed it that I was having my single-player fun, and occasionally that would overlap with someone else's single-player fun. I think I'll be in the minority with this one, however, it is supported a little bit by how everything is temporary, and when you log out, you lose your camp and any workshops that you may have claimed. Briefly, here's how all that works in terms of story. Vault 76 was reserved for gifted occupants that would then go out to reclaim the world 2 decades after the bombs fell. This is kicked off with an event known as Reclamation Day and is supported by a bunch of education and technology, your camp system primarily, to help you in your goal. The vault also seals itself shut 24 hours after Reclamation Day in order to force its people to go out and fix the world. You and every other player you see in the game are one of these occupants, save the Overseer, who had her own separate mission to find and confiscate any remaining nuclear warheads in the region. Appalachia has 2 special characteristics. The first is that it was going through a period of change toward automation. Many areas are captivated by this struggle between humans and the robot workforce that was being created to replace them. Many areas are still operational because of this robotic army, and even the creation of more robots to add to that group are a part of that automation in some locations. The second special characteristic is that aforementioned detail about avoiding all direct nuclear strikes. Appalachia had many survivors and a huge amount of biodiversity that became mutated as radiation came in from nearby areas that were hit by the bombs. I'm not sure if this makes sense within Fallout's world, but most of it was acceptable to me, with some exceptions we'll get to. The large amount of possible mutations ended up being the downfall for people in the region, since it resulted in the scorched beasts evolving from bats in the area, which, as a quick aside here, look and feel like reskinned Skyrim dragons and are really boring to fight. Not only were the scorched beasts deadly predators, they also spread the scorched plague that brings its victims, human and animal alike, under a hive mind of undetermined strength controlled by the scorched beasts. Because of course it does. These victims are clearly changed whenever you see them, and it's how the game cheats its way into having humans that will use guns against you in combat when all the humans are meant to be dead. The problems begin when you try to piece together exactly when the Scorched Plague completed its clean sweep through all of the people in Appalachia. I'm sure there are dates you can find on computers and holotapes in the game, but there's no answer that makes sense no matter what Fallout 76 says. There's no avoiding the fact that it feels like Appalachia went through a second apocalypse the exact day that Vault 76 opened. Many corpses are fresh, not just the humans, but also hunted animals that have been strung up and recently carved open. Scorched humans are meant to eventually become entirely crystallized, and yet there are thousands of them still running around causing trouble. Most of the settlements set up by survivors are still functional, and the whole thing feels beyond contrived. There's also the issue of some areas feeling like they haven't been touched since the bombs fell, but also show signs of survivors inhabiting them at the same time. For example, I have no idea how this town is still under siege by an ongoing battle between strike bots left over by riots that happened before the war, while also having post-apocalyptic shanty constructs all over it. Many locations are like this, and in typical Bethesda fashion, a lot of it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. What could have saved some of it were a rare few survivors here and there, never a whole settlement so that true end-of-the-world atmosphere could be maintained, but less than a dozen humans dotted around the map would have been good. It would make sense too, since there are plenty of animals that haven't been affected by the Scorched Plague yet despite them not being immune, and with large packs of ghouls roaming around it appears that they can't be scorched either, so there should be at least a couple of friendly ghouls that you could talk to. There are even signs of travelers trying to move through the region from the outside, and it feels both like a missed opportunity and a huge coincidence that every single person in Appalachia is dead. The story of the game is about dealing with the Scorched Beasts by completing the projects that each of the now extinct groups of humans were working on. You will go through 5 for the main quest. The Responders, a group that formed to help people survive after the bombs fell. The Raiders, now wiped out and survived by one single robot who wants you to succeed in wiping out the Scorched Beasts so humans will return and become raiders again to entertain her. The Free States, an organization of survivors who wanted Appalachia to break away from the United States before the war. This one is a bit weird. The Brotherhood of Steel, because of course you can't have a Fallout game without them, it's illegal. They were trying to destroy the nests of the Scorched Beasts directly and failed. And finally the Enclave, which is a lone AI in a bunker that at some point was cleared of its elite inhabitants. These 5 groups also signify the 5 phases of the main quest. The Responders inhabited the areas surrounding Vault 76, and so they're the first and most likely chance you'll have of discovering that everyone is dead. Following the Overseer's journey and her holotapes left for you also leads to this conclusion. You'll learn about the Scorched Plague, see your first Scorched Beast, vaccinate yourself against the plague, and then have a follow-up quest to go east to what was once Raider territory and the Free States beyond. In this phase, you learn how widespread the damage dealt by the Scorched Plague truly is, and that no human settlement escaped the destruction. The Free State's path is the beginning of you gearing up to deal with the problem, first by fixing the system that was being developed to detect the flying monsters, and then the Brotherhood of Steel line is when you take your first story-sanctioned assault against them and their nests. Finally, the Enclave portion is when you repair even more damaged technology and begin to truly reclaim Appalachia through killing high-level enemies in order to increase your standing with what's left of the automated military system. So you can gain enough ranks to be authorized to use the nuclear missiles on the Scorched Beast Queen's nest and destroy the hive mind, presumably cleansing the region. That sounds pretty good writing it out that way, so let me temper it with this. Most of the quests you do for these groups are boring fetch stuff. The problem here is that gameplay wasn't improved over Fallout 4's foundation, and it hurts the most when you are following a set of tasks instead of exploring at your own leisure and doing stuff as it comes up. But I can also qualify that criticism with what I think is the most interesting part of 76's main quest. that you can do it in almost any order that you like. I discovered Rose the Raider before I was finished with the Responders. I also discovered the Enclave before either the Free States base or the Brotherhood of Steel. There is an intended order that I laid out above, but you can go at it however you like, or however you happen to stumble upon all of these different pieces of this narrative like I did. And while nothing changes due to this order, I really enjoyed having many details and discoveries slowly become relevant as time went on. The standout for me was discovering Senator Blackwell's bunker quite early on, remembering how much I had read about him in some of the locations on the far western part of the map, and eventually using that discovery to ally with the Enclave with no idea that I was doing some of the main story stuff. It felt like I had just discovered something cool and was rolling with it. Unfortunately, most of the things you do in these locations are the opposite of cool. Some are downright baffling. There's a town in the far southwest of the map where the quest for that area is simply to go to the rooftops and play some musical instruments. Some others are to loot what feels like an arbitrarily chosen container to get some free stuff. Others have robot NPCs that ask you to do some simple task or a bunch of go here then come back work. Some quests don't work at all, especially the world events that often don't trigger unless a player enters the location, like the server considers places on the map dead and doesn't update them unless someone gets close enough to turn them active to the server or something. This can make the map feel deserted, and since many of these world events have cooldown timers before they activate again, I wonder how many I missed because I didn't realize an area had one, or how many were so glitched out that they never activated at all. There are some interesting bits of world building scattered around the map. My favorite was the destruction of the dam to the north of Charleston, which had been recorded as a huge event in the post-war history of Appalachia. An enraged raider leader blew up the dam and wrecked the city in revenge for his partner being captured. This is linked to the other raider questline, and while it's not exactly subtle, it's one of several connections you can make between characters and locations throughout the map on your own. It's also something you can still see the aftermath of in the city itself. It hurt to realize how much effort went into this location, since I couldn't stop myself from wishing there was at least one survivor in the area to speak with about it. Because here's the thing I have to admit, I didn't read every terminal entry, not even close. I made more of an effort with the holotapes, but so much of the story and lore of Fallout 76 is confined to what feels like hundreds of slow-loading, clunky computer entries that I did not have the patience for. It doesn't play to the strengths of the medium at all, and so much of it was crap that I eventually gave up. Some alternative to holotapes, maybe seeing ghostly afterthoughts from the scorched hive mind, would have worked far better since you wouldn't be interrupting your exploration of the location while taking it all in. Conversations with some rare few NPCs would have done the same thing. The potential for this unrealized world can also be felt if you complete the main quest areas. It will eventually dawn on you, either when you so easily complete the vaccination for the Scorched Plague, or how simple it is to combine the resources of the different groups to fight the beasts, that the survivors in Appalachia were very close to victory before they all died. If they had just set aside their differences for a brief period, they would have easily overcome the hive mind. Instead, they found themselves stuck and so desperately ineffectual that they started setting up their own automated contingency plans, anticipating failure and thinking it was inevitable, and probably inspired by all the automation already present in the region. It's not a bad concept for a game like this to explore, and I have to wonder if there's some bitter irony there for the devs that worked on it. Which leads us back to that question which we can finally answer now, or at least try. How exactly did this game happen? I think it's because of money. Whenever I speak about art versus profit, I always get some comments about how of course it's about profit. Video game companies are still companies and they need to make money. This is ignoring the compromise that can be made and is made by so many games and their developers, and that intentions can be far more nuanced than just one or the other. The question is usually only relevant when you start to wonder if something was done just for profit. Fallout 76 has too much content and too much heart in some areas for me to dismiss it as an intentional trading of integrity for money. I think this game was meant to have some NPCs. There are too many areas in the game, like the hub in the Raider Zone, where the place feels incomplete rather than abandoned. I can support this by pointing to how many limitations are imposed on the game by having it always be online. The strain of it breaks quests and combat, and I'm near certain it's why you have such a limited storage capacity in your camp. The robot NPCs already often break in the game today, and they don't need the same type of complex behavior, schedules, and animations to start as human NPCs would. Then there are the enemy types. Even if you've played Fallout 76 already, you may be surprised to learn how many new enemies there are from Fallout 3 and 4. The reason you may be surprised is that the game makes you fight the same super mutants, ghouls, and scorched over and over again. I was lucky and encountered many packs of the mysterious mole people as well, but these rad toads and honey beasts, I only saw them twice in close to 100 hours of playtime. There are mutated sloths, snallygasters, Grafton troll monsters, cave crickets, mothmen, and according to the wiki for the game, some enemies that I never saw at all. There are apparently also super mutant behemoths in 76, and I didn't find a single one despite traversing the entire map. This speaks to how rushed the game was in its final stages. It has diversity that it isn't prepared to show. It has broken buildings that were thrown together so quickly that they either didn't have time to fix them after the problem was discovered, or there wasn't enough time to test it after assembly at all. This is how rushed they were. It comes back to that idea of Bethesda's bug. Is it a missing feature, an intentional design choice, or is something simply not working properly? Are you not meant to be able to uncover the mystery of the mole people? Is the game supposed to end with the death of the Scorched Beast Queen without any notification whatsoever that you finished the story? Why do you continue to have the Overseer's questline in your log after you found all of her holotapes and records? Why doesn't she say anything after you conquer the Scorched Beasts? This list goes on and on and on. I believe the amounts of bugs in this game are directly linked to two causes. The first was the unwillingness of many reviewers both on YouTube and big sites to criticize Fallout 4's state at launch. Just like a bacterial resistance growing strains of superbugs, Fallout 76 was probably thought to be acceptable by some higher-ups at Bethesda due to how Fallout 4 was deemed acceptable. It is great to see so many of those same reviewers now condemning Bethesda for the sorry state of 76, but I also can't help but empathize with Bethesda a little bit here because they were going off bad information. I hope both sides have learned their lesson. Fallout 4 was not acceptable, never mind 76. The second cause is a lot harder to demonstrate and goes against what Bethesda has officially said about the game, but I also think it's fair to consider anything they say suspicious after claims they've made in the past. I do not think Fallout 76 was originally meant to have multiplayer, or at least not as the only way to play. I don't think this was a planned thing right from pre-development. Instead, it was forced onto the game in order to justify always online, for many reasons, but mostly to push microtransactions. Fallout is a massively popular franchise that is without a constant revenue stream that is enjoyed by so many other developers at the moment. The inflated prices of these items is something that I think supports my view, along with the pitiful amount of atoms you get while playing the game to use on the store. There is also a supremely convenient bug on the load order of the main menu which replaces social with the real money shop if you mouse over it to see if your friends are online when you first start the game. What was Fallout 76 originally meant to be then? Well, I think it was Bethesda's shot at their own New Vegas, something they could develop with most of the same assets, with a different spin on the Fallout ingredients. It wasn't trying to be exactly like New Vegas, of course, it had a different focus, and I think that was a sound plan. But what I can't get over ever since coming to this conclusion, the thing that hurts far more than how much time I wasted with this game, all of the bugs, crashes, bizarre design decisions, awkward systems, baffling community relations, and bare-bones patches, is that I can't ignore the hypothetical version of this game that was fully finished, because I think it would have been fucking great. And that was meant to be the end of the video. It was supposed to be sort of a softer ending. Arguably, it happens too soon and it comes out of nowhere. And we're supposed to be in the end transition now, where I speak about Mandalore's channel, and we wind down to the close while the Patreon credits are playing. That's still going to happen, and I'm going to let that run as I recorded it last time. But Fallout 76 was patched. The patch came through right as I was about to finalize the video and get it rendering to put up on YouTube. And in the patch, there was something that caught my eye. Because of that, I had to go back in and play it for a little while longer. And that was probably a waste of time. But I needed to be sure. I needed to experience it for myself that Bethesda had patched the game without testing the version that they were patching to, because they reintroduced so many bugs that they had previously fixed in prior patches. But the thing that made me have to go back in to begin with is the carry weight note that they put in on the patch. I'll read it out for you right now while it's on the screen. Carry weight is now capped to an absolute limit of 1,500 pounds over the character's current maximum carry weight. For example, if your carry weight limit is 210 pounds, then your maximum limit is 1,710 pounds. Dev note: these limits exist primarily to keep servers from performing poorly, which can happen when we have too many items in the game world. They also play role in helping to regulate the in-game economy. Even the patch note has a mistake. We do recognize the desire to be able to own more of the cool items that we have in the game, and we are looking into a variety of solutions, including increasing the stash size. So this confirms something that I speculated about in the video, that the reason why your inventory is so limited is because of server issues. What makes this really troubling is that there are a lot of glitches that I didn't talk about in this video, half to save them for the next video, but also because I didn't experience them myself. One of them was a unlimited carry weight glitch that was very easy to pull off. You just had to equip and then unequip an item that had the pocketed stat. If you did that really quickly, you could make your carry weight go down, 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 until it got into the negatives and rolled over into unlimited carry weight. Apparently, I never did it. In fact, by the time I started playing the game, I think they had patched it already and you couldn't do it anymore. I tried at the very end of my playthrough and I couldn't get it to work. I wonder how poorly the servers were for a lot of people while that was in the game. But the real thing that this triggered in my head is that how? How is a game, not only just a Fallout game, but also a Bethesda game, that they are always about picking up stuff, exploring, you collect things. They really appeal to the hoarder in people. You always have a base or a house. You are encouraged to pick things up for crafting and alchemy, and depending on the game. It's making me question the conclusions I come to at the end of this video, and for the sake of, I guess, an interesting discussion, I'm going to leave it as it is. But I am really unsure about what happened here again. I am more unsure now after reading these patch notes than I was while I was in hour 50 of my time spent with the game. It's making me go to flat earther conspiracy areas. Are the devs so upset about how Bethesda handled the launch of the game that they are intentionally sabotaging it? There's a thing about blaming stupidity on malice instead of just accepting that it's stupidity. And stupidity is a pretty strong word, and maybe I shouldn't be using it, but we'll just roll with it for now. How does a company that has launched a game that is being slammed by almost every outlet and most players not check the version of the game that they are currently patching? How does a patch on a game that is now notorious for having so many issues cause these many problems to resurface? How is Bethesda not aware of how they should be approaching fixing this game? I can't shake that conspiracy theory that there's something going on here, that, you know, there's some malicious compliance going on at some people that are patching the game. You know, while no one explicitly told me that I needed to check the patch version, so I just went ahead and fixed all these issues on an older version of the game because the person who is in charge of releasing this game and managing it now, who made that really bad decision to launch the game while it's early, I'm not going to do them any favors, so I'm just going to follow the exact word of the law that is given to me when it comes to the work I'm doing on this game from now on. That is a more acceptable situation to me than Bethesda being so incompetent that they patched an old version of the game and brought all these bugs and problems back that they already solved, and that they made a game that needs to heavily limit the amount of items you can carry because it lags the server too hard, and instead of limiting the items themselves, they limit the weight instead, as if the weight matters more than the amount of items that there are. Like, the weight isn't going to make a difference. Even that doesn't make any sense. It also confirms that there were many people that were just ignoring the movement speed penalty when you have too much stuff in your inventory. It must not have been worth the effort to sit around and micromanage that all the time. This whole thing is bizarre, and I'm having a lot of trouble accepting that a company that have made so many games in the past that for the most part were impressive in many ways is struggling so hard to patch a game. The only other acceptable answer that I can come to is that Bethesda has cut most of their losses and just has a skeleton crew working on 76 to just show some token effort of trying to fix it while they've moved on to bigger and presumably better things with Starfield and the new Elder Scrolls game, which I have some severe reservations about at the moment. The only thing I want to add to this right now, and as you can tell, this isn't scripted, I'm scrambling to put this together after being hit with this patch while the video was almost ready to go up on YouTube, is that for the video, I had to go back and play a little bit of Fallout 4. And I hadn't played Fallout 4 again until the script was already written, recorded, and I was putting it together in Adobe Premiere. And then when I got to the part in the script where I needed Fallout 4 footage, I thought about using the past videos I had made, and I thought, no, I should go back in and I should record it with some new footage because now I render at a higher resolution for YouTube. And just the feel of that game, it's immediately obvious going from 76 to Fallout 4 that 76 is like sitting in a sauna with a winter coat on. It's that level of just like the game is just sweating. I feel like I should go and apologize to the computer for running it afterwards. It's like it's so fundamentally unstable that you can just feel it going from 76 to Fallout 4. It's like going from a really hot room and stepping outside into fresh air. Everything moves better, the shooting feels better, enemies actually react to you when you're next to them, they react to you shooting at them. It's functional in all the ways that 76 isn't. And I guess the conclusion that I'm coming to as I mentally work through this live as I'm staring at my voice being recorded into Audacity is that I can't accept that a team at Bethesda made this game and were playing it as it was developed. They made an area, they jumped in, they ran around, they placed some enemies, they ran around, and they fought them, and they saw that everything was working properly before they moved on to the other area. I cannot accept that they put this game together, and these problems were there at every stage of the way, and they were like, yeah, that's fine, this is going to be okay. I can't accept that. And what I'm getting at is that I'm doubling down on my theory. This was something that was meant to be like Fallout 4, and at one point did function like Fallout 4. That it was as smooth as Fallout 4, you could play it like Fallout 4, and then along came the big multiplayer idea and swooped down, dominated the whole game, and it has just been one band-aid fix after the other to make it work, it's like I was recently playing FTL for the first time on stream, and you can divert power from your different systems to the ones that are the most important for the situation that you're dealing with at the time. This is what's happened to Fallout 76. Oh, we have NPCs in the game? Well, the server doesn't like that, take them out or else it's going to be too laggy. Oh, we're going to have a lot of crafting in the game and players can pick up a lot of stuff and disassemble it? Well, no, that causes the servers to be laggy. You have to really restrict how much they can carry and how much they can put into their stash. I refuse to accept otherwise unless someone at Bethesda outright comes and tells me in confidence or something like that, which is never going to happen. So that's my conclusion, and that's what I'm sticking with. The patches that they've done for this game have been so strange. There was that patch I talked about in the video where they added a push-to-talk feature, and that was a big deal. That was like the headline feature of that patch is that they finally added push-to-talk, which is just ridiculous. But there was a patch that did something else that was very questionable. I guess that it lends more support to this idea that there's a group of developers that are working on this game now that are taking the exact word as their guide, even if it makes the game worse. Because once again, this is a very clear-cut issue, and yet they spent dev time making the game worse. And that was about canned stew. There was a bug, now that we know it was a bug, where when you're walking around Appalachia playing the game, you would occasionally get 5 cans of stew plopped down into your inventory out of nowhere. And when I first noticed this, I sort of stopped in the game and was like, whoa, what the hell, where did that come from? I don't remember picking up any stew, and I'm nowhere near any sources of stew. You know, there's so many in Appalachia. How do I have this food all of a sudden? As I played the game, I realized that there was a world quest in a city to the northeast of Vault 76. There's a factory there that can make stew, and the world event is called Feed the People. The responders set up an automated system that whenever the factory was ready to do another production cycle, it would call out to anyone nearby that would go in and feed all the ingredients into the machine, and it would spit out all this finished food for them to eat. What happened was that whenever you finished that quest, everyone else on the server would get the stew. Now, when I ran up and did it for the first time, I didn't get any as my reward for finishing the quest. So I thought it was some sort of server-wide event where players can join in to give everyone a gift on the rest of the server, and in exchange they get better rewards for actually being the ones that operated the factory and therefore spat out all the food for everyone to get. Not only is this a cute, kind of wholesome idea, it was also probably the best sort of reward and the best sense of community that you got on the server while you were playing. It was the only part of the game that made me actually want to go out and talk to other people and maybe see if there was more stuff like that out in the world, that you could work together for some communal good instead of just on your own. Well, Bethesda decided that that was a bug and patched it out. And with all the bugs that are in the game, most of the ones you saw in this video and all of the ones that you'll be seeing in the next video stayed for the most part. Most of them didn't get patched out, but this did. And I just can't see the rationale of focusing so much dev time on that problem when they apparently have so many problems fixing the other bugs and improving the sorry state of how combat works, which is in every single area in the game. But no, that stew quest, that's the one that needs to be squashed right now. And as strange as that example is, I think that's what I'm gonna leave off on, or sign off on. I'm sorry to break character here for a little bit and talk normally and not have a scripted, thoroughly wrought out response to what this patch did, but like I said, I was minutes away from finishing the video. I didn't want to put the video up already out of date before it even hits YouTube. So this is my own Band-Aid, 76 style, it's kind of fitting, onto this video that already took way too much time. I'm about to talk about that with a past Joe that you're going to listen to in the same kind of voice I'm speaking in now as I speak about Mandalore after this. So I've spoken enough. I'm very sorry, and I'll see you next time. Alright, time to lose the announcer voice and just speak normally. How is it going? So yeah, I'm gonna break character with the Mandalore fake feud that we have going on. Mandalore is a great guy. I speak to him every now and then, and you should check out his channel. He's a really good guy. He makes a lot of good videos. I don't know if I can link them on the screen anymore. They're constantly changing annotations and stuff on YouTube, but there should be a link below, and maybe I'll put something on the screen right now, and you'll be like, oh yeah, that's Mandalore. I've seen him around, or Joe, you're crazy. Mandalore has a lot of subs. We all know who he is already. But yeah, there you go. Mandalore, go check out his videos. He does a lot of obscure games, and it's more about the journey that you go along with him rather than direct sort of analysis sort of stuff. And I find his videos very entertaining. He's also very, very funny. And yeah, obscure is really the best way to do it. I think the end game for Mandalore is that he will make a game and then do a video on it before anyone has played it. And that will be the ultimate obscurity that he will accomplish. And I look forward to it, yeah. So, yeah, there's going to be another video on Fallout 76 that's coming out in a few days. And so I hope it's a few days. It's going to be a lot longer than this one, and it's going to be a commentary of all of the glitches that I encountered while I played. So you can look forward to that. I don't know if it's going to be entertaining. I think it will, but the goal of it is not so much to be entertaining than it is to stand as this proof of what Bethesda did with this release, and it's just my own playthrough and just the bugs that I encountered as one perspective and how bad it was. So if you just imagine how many that I didn't encounter because my perspective is very limited, just how bad the game really must be. So yeah, I can't promise it's going to be a fun time, but some of the glitches were really entertaining, so there's going to be some diamonds in the rough there somewhere, I think. Yeah, so I hope you guys like it, but yeah, just a little bit of warning of how that's going. I'll probably write a comment in the below the video apologizing for how long this video is. I wasn't supposed to do a long video until The Witcher was done, but I thought, like I said in the script, I thought 76 would be something I just played for a little bit, and then I could do a quick video on it, and that wasn't the case. So I apologize very much for that, and I will be more careful in the future. Yeah, there won't be another long video until Witcher. Yeah, if I start playing a game and it's taking way too long, then I'll just stop and I'll move on to something else. So yeah, sorry about that. That project is still ongoing. I'm not ready to give any details about it yet, but yeah, these videos did set it back a little bit, and I'm sorry about that. And also, I'll stop waffling now. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Happy New Year. Texas red not cleared leather for a bullet fairly ripped, and the ranger's aim was deadly with the big iron on his hip. Big iron on his hip.